La vida es corta sin parar, mirar y de reír para celebrar. Cada momento hay que gozar, como si mañana no va a llegar.
Hola, hola. Welcome to Entre Tías Amiguis, the podcast where we dive into the wild roller coaster ride of adulting. I'm your host, Adri Rodriguez, a queer Salvadorian native, a first-gen trailblazer, a multipreneur and licensed psychotherapist, here to share wisdom, stories, and real talk with my tías and amiguis and other incredible guests who inspire and uplift our community. I want to remind you that while I am a licensed psychotherapist, this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. The discussions we have here are not substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Now let's dive into today's conversation and explore the journey of adulting together. Grab your cafecito, get comfy, and let's get started. So welcome to Entre Tías y Amiguis, a new episode for this week. I have a very, very special guest. One of the funnest things about having a podcast is that I get to invite like my favorite people to have conversations with them and sometimes hear the same story that I have heard so many times, but it's so special and it's so important. I think it is going to resonate with a lot of people. I'm Adri Rodriguez, your host. I am a queer Salvadoreña, inmigrante. I came to the United States when I was 16. I'm a first gen and all in all. And I always talk about those experiences as I introduce myself because everything that I do, being a daughter, a sister, a therapist, a photographer, everything that I do inevitably goes through this lens, right, of the experiences that live within my history, my personal history, but also like the people that I come from. And so with that, it's a pleasure to have you all here. It's so nice to have you. And can you introduce yourself for our audience?
Yes. My name is Michelle. So I'm actually not a native of Sacramento. I'm originally from Southern California, but I moved here, I think like 8 years ago now. Yeah, it's about 8 years. I'm a family law attorney. I am Mexican. I remember if I said that I'm Mexican American. And I would consider myself to be queer. And yeah, I think just some like fun facts about myself. Hold on, I just like completely blanked on everything that I was going to say.
It's okay.
I literally was like, oh, yeah, here's some fun facts. Oh, yeah, so I'm like hugely into like the whole zodiac sign thing. So anytime I'm like talking to people, one of the first questions, oh, yeah, what sign are you? And I know it's so cliche, but I'm a huge zodiac sign person. I'm an Aquarius too.
That tells you a lot.
Yeah, I know. It says a lot. But yeah, no, that's I think that's a good summary of kind of like, you know, who I am. And yeah.
Okay, well, welcome. It's, you know, I already knew all these things about her and I know she's awesome. So I'm just glad to have you here. So I do have some questions because I wanted to be intentional because we can talk about 1,000 things. But one of the place where we met at a Women of Sacramento event for business owners, for people that are networking, building their community. And so immediately when you started talking about family law and being an attorney, I was just like, who are you? And I want to know everything about you. And so for our audience, I wanted to start with asking you, how have the intersections of your identity, so being queer, being Latina, being Mexican, particularly being from SoCal, how have all those experiences, because of your identities, how have they shaped this journey and becoming an attorney, a first-gen attorney? Because I know that that's something that you're very proud of. And so how have those identities shaped you?
Yeah, so it's interesting because growing up, so I grew up in a predominantly Mexican American community. And so, I mean, that's kind of like all I knew, right? And so when I graduated high school, I left and I went to undergrad at the University of Miami. And so that was a huge culture shock for me because even though like there were Latinos from everywhere, it was the first time that I was really exposed to people of like different socioeconomic statuses, different like backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, and also just like different types of communities. And so that was definitely a culture shock kind of going into that environment. Imagine me when I left high school and I left home, I knew I wanted to be an attorney, but it was like one of those stereotypical, you know, my family's like, oh, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, like which one are you going to do? And, you know, stereotypical, the whole, you're really good at arguing, right? You're really good at advocating for people. So why don't you think about doing that, right? Being an attorney. And to be honest, you know, been reading some articles, and I think I talked to you about this, lately, about specifically Latinas who decide to become attorneys and embark on that advocacy route, and how intertwined that is with how much a lot of us were relied upon as children to provide, care for people in the household or be third parents. I am the eldest daughter. There's three of us. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and we're all really close in age. But, I did find myself taking that third parent role a lot in the household. And so a lot of that made me question as to, did I really want to become an attorney because I wanted to become an attorney? Or was it something that I'm like, okay, here's the skill set that I have gained throughout my childhood, and kind of the, what I feel like I need to give back to the community in terms of care and advocacy, and wanting to go down that path. And so, like I said, I'm coming into this situation now where it's a completely new city. It's across the country, no family there, and really navigating for the first time on my own who I am just as a person, just generally, and how my pieces fit into now this new community that I'm also in, and going through that. And so that was definitely an interesting experience going through that. And I honestly didn't really reflect too much during college if I was doing what I was doing because I actually wanted to, because I was so focused on, hey, I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I'm the first one in my family to potentially be an attorney. So let's get to where we need to get to. And it wasn't until I got to law school. I went to law school in Arkansas. So that was a whole other...
Talk about another culture shock.
To where I was the only Latina in my class.
How many people were in your class?
It was 90. We started off with 90 students, and I was the only Latina in my class. And so that in itself was also an interesting experience. But again, going to law school, you're trying to get through it, figure it out. It's difficult. I come back from California, take the bar, and then do my thing. And even now, there's a good amount of Latinos in the bar now, but even then still too, it's rare to see another Latina family lawyer in the courtroom, even currently. So what I will say is a lot of what made me different going into each one of these steps as I, went through my journey in becoming an attorney, I will say is what helped me, finish, right? And reaching my goal into passing the bar and actually becoming like a practitioner. But I also will say, a lot of times it was heartbreaking, right? Going through some of these things. And also too, acknowledging that I did have a certain level of privilege as well coming into these spaces, because even though I am Latina, I am white passing. Not that I ever exercised that privilege intentionally, but that was something that I've always tried to be very mindful of as well, in the sense of, not taking things for granted, making sure I'm doing my part too, just generally in helping continue to lift other people up, lifting other people of color up, especially when I got to Little Rock, when I was in Arkansas for law school. Like I said, that was a whole other environment.
Yeah.
When it comes to just like race, ethnicity, sexuality, community, and things of that nature. So, I would say that my background and my culture played a huge role as to, again, not just why I decided to follow this path, but also me staying in it and being where I'm at today.
Mm-hmm. As I hear you talk, one of the things that comes to my mind is how nowadays, right, like we're talking about intersections of identity, we're talking about power and privilege, but I still remember when I went to grad school, when I was in undergrad, these were not conversations that we were having. And so many of us started our careers just sort of like, I just want to get to the end goal. I just want to be a therapist. I want to be a lawyer, right? Like whatever is like the tangible path. And for me, at least, it has not been until after finishing like the academic sort of formation that then I began questioning, like, how does me being a Latina, how does me being queer, how does me, right, the exposure to other people and having different experiences sort of like lifts up the mirror. But I know that for a long time, it was just like, go, just finish the goal, just get it done. And these conversations weren't happening yet. So then it takes me into like this part about your professional journey, right? So you would chose family law. How did you get to choose family law? And then now thinking about your experiences as a Latina, as being the only white, the only non-white person in your class, being in Miami, having all these new experiences. How does that all influence the work that you do now in family law?
Yeah. So I had no interest whatsoever in getting into family law. Zero interest. And also, just to clarify, I was the only Latina in my class. There were Black students, but again, there was only like 5 Black students out of like 90 of us.
Yeah.
You know, so we created kind of our own community too within our class to like provide a sense of support too within like the very small minority community that was within our class. But yeah, no, I did not want to do family law whatsoever. I remember my last year of law school, I took a family law course. And I remember looking over to my best friend there in law school, Olivia. Her name's Olivia. I said, I will never do family law.
No way.
Like, I said, I will never do family law. I'm like, this is too much drama. Like, I know people love cheese man. I'm like, I'm not one, right? Like, I'm not the one. Like, it doesn't do anything for me. So I was like, I will never do family law. Mm-hmm. What I wanted to do coming out of law school, I wanted to do immigration and criminal law, criminal defense law. And so when I first got out, I did get some experience doing immigration and criminal defense. A lot of the immigration work was it was called defensive immigration. So it was like people that were detained and, helping them hopefully like find either some form of relief or at least getting them out of detention while they were trying to find some form of relief for their case. And it was very emotionally draining doing that, where it just like it felt like it hit too close to home, and it was a lot. It was a lot, and I didn't expect to have that kind of reaction to it. It was like I've been through so much, and it's like, oh, I can handle this, right? This is what I went to law school for, to help my people. Like, this is what I do. But yeah, so within that first year, I figured out, I don't think this is the route for me. And during that journey, I ended up getting a few family law cases, and my first like job at a like larger firm was at a family law firm.
So it's like family law chose you.
Yeah. So I kind of just like I was okay, cool. Let's figure it out. And mind you, I'm not married. I don't have children. Never been married, and kind of going to the experience of learning family law and seeing all these different situations and scenarios with these families that all look different, mind you. I've had a diverse array of families in diverse types of situations. I think the one thing that I've loved about it is the fact that it is so different. Every case that I see is so different. But at the end of the day, at least the way I practice when it comes to my clients, I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing by them and by their family. Family to me is very important. And even though I don't have any direct experience with going through a divorce or having child custody issues, I know what it was like to be a child and what it was like to be a child of parents that maybe should have gotten a divorce or should have handled certain things a little bit differently or used resources that we may not have known were available to us at the time. And so a lot of the work that I do, I think about those things when kind of trying to figure out, do I want to stay in this? Because I've been doing it for almost 8 years now. And 7 of those 8 years have been in family law. And the one question that I consistently get all the time from clients, I don't know, or a statement, a question, I don't know how you do this every day. Or how do you do this every day? And I give them the answer that I just gave. It's because if you're coming to me and you're choosing me as an attorney, it's because you prioritize some level of accountability, transparency, and you're trying to do the right thing by your family.
So even as people are going through some of the hardest times, you're looking for that commonality of like trying to do right by everyone and being able to care even as you're going through this like high conflict and one of probably the most stressful times in a family, being able to orient yourself into how do we remain healthy and supportive and try to cause the least amount of damage, if anything, as families go through this.
Yeah, because that's the one thing with family law situations. I tell my clients all the time, nobody's going to come out of here a winner. Both of you guys or everybody that's a part of this case is going to come out losing something, right? But how are you going to set yourself up in a way to at least rebuilding, right? You're rebuilding because you're in essence creating a new life for yourself too, right? Where you're still dealing with old pieces, but you're going to incorporate different types of new pieces in a way that you never thought you were going to do because you never thought this was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, so that's it's been very interesting, but that's how I fell into family law and I've stayed. And like I said, I think those are the reasons why I do stay. But yeah, it's really difficult. It is emotionally draining, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure my client is well informed in what the law is and how that benefits, them, but also how it helps them also do the right thing.
That's so important to be doing this work with values. That it's not just like, let's get through it, but like your values are really shining through as you describe your work there. When we were talking about what kind of interview you wanted to have, what topic you wanted to right? You talked about this idea of rocking the boat. And you and I have had a lot of offline conversations about being like first gen and being called the strong one and being like, you can do everything, right? And that sometimes it's just like, the burden of that. And within the burden of that, though, there's this huge gift of being the trailblazers, the people that are rocking the boat, the ones that are coming to say, actually, it doesn't work like that for everybody, right? Like with this voice and these experiences. And so how do you rock the boat? Like, what do you mean by that? Like, what is your aspiration as you claim this identity of like, I'm going to shake things up. Like, I am not going to be doing this work in the way that is just about following bullet points or checklists, but rather like with those values that you were just talking about. So tell me about rocking the boat.
So when it comes to, I guess, professionally and most recently, with where I'm at as a practicing attorney, just being in the courtroom, just sitting in front of a judge, right? With my earrings and with my hair down, with, you know what I mean? Like still preserving and uplifting my culture and expressing it in a way that I want to express it, but still, of course, being professional, but never hiding that aspect of who I am, right? Being unapologetically who I am, even in front of a court of law, for me in itself, that's rocking the boat, right? And I think that's one thing too, that when it comes to my clients, I do appreciate, right, is that I maintain that sense of I'm going to mess this word, authenticity. I think that is very important. Even to dealing with some of these opposing counsels. I remember when I first started practicing, how often I would get, are you a paralegal? Are you a law clerk? Or tell me, well, I've done this for 5,500 years, so I know better than you. Right? And just still sitting there listening and then kicking their asses when they're in front of the judge. But
you're welcome.
Yeah. Like, so, and mind you, be like, there's a lot of times too, where people will try to put you in your place and it'll work, but you come back. And for me, that's rocking the boat, just getting back up and still going back out there and trying and not giving up is rocking the boat. The fact that, they gave us that same lecture I'm sure they give every first year law school class about look to your left, look to your right. One or both of you are not going to be here at the end of the 3 years. And knowing that, especially as the only Latina in my class, that I saw it through and that I sat in every one of those classes and that I participated in the conversations that were happening, that was rocking the boat.
Yeah. And then you're here 8 years later.
Yeah.
8 years later, you're still doing this work and committed to it, to do it with your values, driven by your values.
Yeah. Now it's just the only difference, I'm sure, because I would be a little hellraiser at home. I'm not at home, or at least I'm making money off of it now. So that's that's helpful.
I guess all the arguments,
right? All the attitude, all the you can't tell me nothing. Yeah, now it's paying off a little bit more now. But yeah, so that's what I would say.
It makes me think about like that line, on Instagram. Sometimes like existence is resistance, right? That sometimes we carry the burden of being the first, of being the only, of being right. That there is this like extra that we have to be doing and constantly chasing the next thing. And just even from like this perspective of like existing, showing up, making it, being you is enough of rocking the boat. And then the next level, right, with accrued privilege, with accrued experience, with the years under your belt, there is other ways that also you can rock the boat. So do you have any experiences around kind of like those moments in court or those situations that have made you reflect and say, I really need to stand up for what I'm about even more because of the need that I see. I know you aspire to be like a judge too, right? And so all of those things is making me think about how do you consciously and ongoingly use the privilege that you've been able to acquire to get to this place of rocking the boat with intention?
Yeah. So I think it's going to kind of align a little bit with the point you're making about just existing and what kind of earthquake, for lack of better terms, that really does like create. The example I'm going to give, the very first trial that I had was in front of a Latina judge in Hayward. I did a civil harassment restraining order judge, and it was in front of a Latina judge. She had her hoops in, she had her nails in, and I was like, oh my God, like, this is awesome. Like, you know, like just seeing her, I'm just like, this is great, right? And the privilege that I had, right, to be able to do my very first trial in front of this Latina, like, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, like, cool, they do exist here, right? And that was maybe out of the 8 years, almost 8 years I've been practicing, I've maybe been before 3 or 4 Latina judges.
Wow.
Which is wild.
Wow.
And so I will never forget that. And sometimes just that thought is what gets me to continue being okay with pissing people off. Because at the end of the day, I know I do that sometimes, right? Because I'm standing up for things that usually people would not stand up for, or they'll keep their mouth shut because of who it is that they're talking to, right? Yeah. So I might push the envelope a little bit with a judge, even though normally someone looking, no, the judge says, I don't give a shit. If I feel like my client is not being heard, we're going to try this again. We might try it in a different way. We're going to be respectful about it, but we're going to try again. Because just because you're up there wearing that robe doesn't make you better than anybody else. Right? So with that, it's just very recently, one of my clients who's Latina, I met up with her to get some documents, and she had brought her little girl with her. And mind you me, I never like for the kids to be present, right, for anything, because, you know, I never want them to be exposed. But the first thing, because she knew that already, the first thing she said, she's like, you know, my daughter wanted to see my attorney, right? And so there's like this little Latina little girl, you know what I'm saying? And just that, me knowing that she was even in some way curious about, well, what does your attorney look like, right? And what does she do? In my opinion, I'm setting some kind of seeds to continue rocking the boat through others, right? Like, so I want you to see this. I want you to see other Latino professionals or other Latinos doing things that you may be interested in doing, right? Because I also want you to feel like you can do anything that you can or that you want to.
Talk about rocking the boat and planting seeds. How did your experience in being in grad school and being the only Latina and then now moving into actually being in court, and you're saying 3 to 5 experiences with judges that are Latinos, how have those moments invigorated or fired you up? What are the experiences, the type of microaggressions? Because I'm thinking about who's going to be listening to this episode, right? And so part of the people that are listening, I know there are also people who aspire to be attorneys and to be in a position like you. And you know, maybe differently than when we were growing up or we were in school, we didn't have these voices. Like we had to go like look for them, right? What are some of the things, those experiences that you have had that were not so positive that also like invigorated and inspired you to say that sucked, that hurt, that was awful, but I'm going to keep pushing? And like, how did you find the strength to keep doing that?
Yeah. So I think the first one I'm going to mention is, you know, I grew up in a very poor family, right? So I didn't have the financial resources to do a lot of the like LSAT preps, like the LSAT, you know, the tests that you take to go to law school, or like once I got out of law school, the bar prep is right. Like being able to have the privilege to take time off to be able to study for the bar, right? I'm going to say that the California State Bar is the hardest bar in the nation. I know New York's going to be pissed off about that, but I think the California State Bar is the hardest bar in the nation. And so I knew, I'm like, I have to take time off to do this, right? So those little like obstacles, like, again, socioeconomic situations, there were times where I'm like, I don't know who like, I need to work. Like, I need to make money. Like, what if I can't pass this bar? And then what? Like, this bar is going to be really hard. When I took the bar, it was still a 3-day bar. It's a 2-day bar now. So there was a lot of doubt. Like, there was so much doubt. And a lot of it was tied to finances too, at the early stages, right? But like, I was very well aware of the limited access that I had to resources that some of my peers otherwise had. But at the end of the day, again, because when you're raised in a situation where you're dealing with what you have and you make with what you have, that's how I'm bred, right? You make do with what you have and you're still going to get to where you need to get to because that's who you are.
Yeah.
And so on that end, I had to push through it. I had to figure it out. And thankfully, I had family members that were helping out as much as they could, right? Siblings that were always a really strong support system. And so mentors that were always a really strong support system. And so I think that was one of the ones early on, though, that really would get me down to access to resources, right? Because it would make things a little bit easier. Some of the other things, just like generally like in spaces where as a woman, right, being in kind of, I don't think not anymore as much like a male dominated profession. There's not as much anymore, but still, it's like you still get the whole, again, oh, you're a paralegal, oh, you're a legal intern, or you know what I mean, not taking you seriously, or assuming certain things once they know, oh, you're Latina, you speak Spanish, like the stereotypes that come along with that, or thinking that they start feeling comfortable with making certain assumptions about who you are when they find out what you are. And so, what's funny about this question is I've put thought into the obstacles, right, that I've had to overcome to get here. But at the same time, I think one of the reasons why I was also able to overcome them is because I do try to find the positive and the like light at the end of the tunnel, and like really focus on that. And so a lot of these obstacles, I've tried to figure out a way to switch my perspective on them and how to make them opportunities to grow and opportunities to strengthen myself, which is hard, but it's made me a little bit blind now, though, to the fact that they were there and I had to overcome them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, there is this part about the fact that we didn't used to have this conversation when we first got into this field, that it almost makes it feel like, did that really happen? Like, to me, like, did I have that experience, or was the world like differently when I was in grad school? Because I don't remember that. Because, what comes to mind is like some of my clients that I see in therapy, that are first gen, that are queer, that are the first in their family, and the sense of, grief that many people experience. For you, right, like you're naming that you were able to find a way to repurpose these experiences and to like reframe it in a way that push you up, and it's like, I'm gonna do it scared, I'm gonna do it with doubt, I'm gonna do it in hardship, and I'm just gonna keep pushing. And there are other people that as they do that, they also experience a lot of grief. Have you experienced grief, or have you been able to tap into the grief of the way that your career has developed with both the hardships, but also like the blessings that have come from having to push so hard?
That's a very interesting question. I think the bulk of the grief that I do have that stems from my profession was how much priority I placed on trying to get through those obstacles and get to a certain level in my professional career, and what other things in my life took a hit, but just were not as much of a priority, right? So being able to work on my mental health, being able to work on my emotional health and my emotional intelligence, right? I haven't been able to do those things. Like let me rephrase. I haven't put importance on those things until I would say maybe the last 4 years.
Because you were just in the grind.
Yeah, it was just like go, but right. I start thinking about, damn, like, how did I treat people? Right? How did I treat people over that time? I was so focused on getting to where I needed to get to, and like, did I show enough care to my siblings while I was in college and law school? Right? Did they feel like I showed enough attention, enough care? Was I there enough for friends? You know what I mean? For close friends. It's like, there were times where I'd prioritize getting my work done over going out, right? So I didn't really have the like true experience of like a college student where you're out partying. Because I was working 2 fucking jobs to make sure I can afford shit. You know what I'm saying? And so if there's any grief tied to my profession or the route, the obstacles and all that stuff that I took, that grief is more so, damn, like, I should have or could have put a little bit more time and attention into like my mental health.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Emotional health. Looks like. But again, also stemming from childhood, that's not something we've ever been taught either to put importance on. You know, I don't want to hear you crying. You do what you have to do, and I don't want to hear you bitching about it.
And even the praise of you being here, right? And having been able to accomplish so much, sometimes I think it can be really confusing to have people be like, wow, look how far you've made it. And it's like, yeah, but like, it's not always been great, and it's not always been easy, and it's not always been something that I could guarantee was going to happen. Right. And so, one of the things that I'll say that comes to mind is just like how the kids are doing it better nowadays, just because they are having access to conversations that I don't think in our generation still we were having access to, right? Like even the conversation about mental health, like the fact that like 2 Latinas with, high degrees are having this conversation, like this stuff didn't happen 10, 8, 5 years ago. Like this is like a new way that like all these voices are coming through and saying like, I have these experiences too. And so I see now like a lot of the younger generation that is entering these experiences that we had, having a little bit more of that attunement to that grief, to that pain, to that awareness of like my mental health needs to be prioritized. But I think I can relate to you. And that as a therapist, my own mental health journey didn't start until like I was really solid in my career as a therapist, right? And the realization of just like, wait a minute, is there stuff that like I need to address, right? Because I'm supposed to be the one in charge and the expert here. And so the grief that you're talking about of this realizations also comes from this like 20, like what is that saying? Like hindsight, hindsight you could
2020 or something
2020 or something like that. Where we can say, oh yeah, like that was painful, that was hard. But when we were in the middle of it, you're just going. It's like, hey, like working 2 jobs, having to figure it out how to like divide things so that you can make it, so that you can still study, so that you can still do all these things, and being first gen, also not having the kind of the role model to say, oh, I'm seeing somebody, right? Like right now we're having this conversation and somebody is going to say, okay, check. When you're in grad school, when you're becoming an attorney, when you're in those first steps, take care of your mental health, because now we see you and you're talking about it, you're putting a voice to it. But for a long time, I never saw other Latina therapists. I didn't know how people were getting through. I thought we were just all tired and all of it. And now that I have my own business, I'm in private practice, that I have like autonomy around how I do my day to day, I'm like, oh, like you don't have to be stressed out. Like, what do you mean, right? Like when I was able to actually go to therapy and be able to afford therapy for a long time, it's like, oh, like I actually can take care of my mental health. But a lot of those things, we were just too busy trying to like realize that it was a need. And so if you're listening, please go to therapy early. Please practice self-care with the consideration that you also are likely, struggling financially or mentally, or you don't have role models, right? And so this is an encouragement. So as someone who has found their purpose on challenging, the status quo and challenging beliefs and perspectives about what attorneys should be, what family attorneys look like, what does it mean to be authentic and go into the courtroom? What are some of the things that you do ongoingly to take care now of your mental health? Because this pushing back and this resistance, I'm going to imagine, leaves a little bit of a trail that maybe you're more aware of nowadays. So how do you actively take care of yourself when those moments happen that even though you take pride about rocking the rocking the boat can be tiring? So how do you take care of yourself?
Yeah, so I actually did not start going to therapy, I think, until like maybe 2018. And it wasn't necessarily because like anything was wrong. Like I was also very much of the stereotypical, like, I don't need therapy. What? Like, no, absolutely not. And then, 2018, I was like, you know what? Let me try this out. And thankfully, I was able to find a Latina therapist that was like awesome. Like, she just was great. And it was super helpful. Like, at first, I was going literally once every week, and it was so helpful. It was just nice to have a safe space where you didn't feel like somebody, like, for example, it took me so long to feel comfortable with talking with my younger siblings about certain things because I didn't want to feel like I was burdening them because I'm the one that's supposed to be taking care of them, right? I'm supposed to be the one that's there for them. There's no way I can burden them with my issues or like concerns, fears, things like that. And so having this kind of like venue or avenue or place, space to do that was huge. And so I've been consistently going to therapy since 2018. I will say like this past year and a half, it's kind of like, fallen off, and I've been a couple times throughout the year. But another thing that I found back in law school was yoga. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to fucking do yoga. There's going to be so many white people there. Like, it's just a white space. I started in Little Rock in Arkansas. I was like, there's no way. But you know what? I did it. I had found a yoga studio that was super, because I can't do not that I can't, I just, the very traditional yoga where it's very meditative. Like, I never get into it, but I had found a studio that incorporated a lot of like, what is that? Like the, when you're working, like when you do the workouts, like the HIIT workouts, they incorporated that.
So the combination, exercise and yoga.
Yeah, so it was great. And, coming back to California, the yoga community is a lot more diverse here too. And so that has been consistent, like the yoga. Like, I love it. And so yoga, working out, the therapy, and in that therapy, in that process of kind of like exploring myself and learning about myself, I've also learned to go ahead and lean on people that I normally would not lean on because, again, of the whole, no, I'm the oldest.
I'm supposed to be strong and take care of everybody.
Yeah, you lean on me. So that has been huge as well. And it's also helped strengthen the relationships that I have with those people, right? Because I never realized just, I guess, like how much I guess I was missing out by being able to like share my own shit with them and them connecting with me in that way too. So that's been a huge thing. And then just recently, I have actually gotten into meditation. Yeah. So so I do use the Calm app, and I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to like stick with it. No, bro. I've done it for like a month and a half now. Every morning when I wake up, 10 minutes in the morning. And if I do feel super stressed out, I'll do like one of the short 1, 2, 3 minute meditation sessions. And they really do help. They help. So I don't think I've mentioned this, but especially with having this heart health, like I had some heart like health issues over the past year, being mindful of how I manage my stress has been extremely important. And so, so I would say therapy, like being active, like moving, and then this meditation has helped. Also traveling. I just love, I love traveling. I love seeing new perspective. It just gives me like this boost of energy and new perspective that it just feels very enlightening and refreshing. So, and again, that's a privilege that I didn't have growing up, but now, as we're making some kind of money, thankfully now, we're able to do that. And so I try to take advantage and be very grateful for those abilities. Cause like I said, we do what we can when we're younger, and that's something I've always been curious about, is what do other places look like? What do other people do? How are other cultures? Like, how are they similar? How are they different? And that's always refreshing to me. And it helps my mental health and my soul and just my emotional well-being.
what I love that you're naming is that, yeah, therapy is an avenue, right? But that there is a way of a need to take care of yourself holistically, that it is the mental, spiritual, physical, emotional way of showing up for ourselves. Because I guess in my head, I'm like, I don't want you to get discouraged if you're like a baby attorney and you're like still in law school. You're considering it's like, dang, it's going to be like 8 years until I can it's going to take all this time until I can start doing these things. And so what advice do you have for people who also share some of these marginalized identities, like and maybe facing or have the potential of facing some of these challenges that you've overcome? What advice do you have for them so that they can feel empowered to be that authentic self, to use their voice to be heard, and to also use their presence in their existence, right, as an act of intentional resistance, that it is enough to show up, but it might take a toll on you. So like, what advice do you have for this baby attorneys that are coming or people that are interested in your field to empower themselves even through moments where you feel disempowered or you feel hopeless?
To be completely transparent, I don't know if my journey would have taken me as long as it did if I had found a few mentors like early on. I did have mentors, like, don't get me wrong, I had mentors, like, and I'm so grateful for them, like, so grateful. But, you know, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, when was the first time I met a Latina lawyer? And I don't think it was until college, right? That I met somebody that was in the law, or even like a paralegal, right? Like something like, and so I think for people that are either about to start the journey or haven't started yet, or they're in the middle of it, everybody's timeline is different. But I think that we need to stop being afraid of utilizing the resources that we don't even realize are there. For me, it was always a pride thing. Like, I don't want to ask for help. I'm going to do it by myself. Yeah. And that's why I say too, I think my journey may have taken not that it's long, because I don't think it's long, but you know, like, who knows? Maybe my path would have been a little bit different if I would have asked for help in certain places where help could have been provided. And so not being afraid to ask for help or seek that guidance is super important, but also too, and I know a lot of people say that, like, don't be afraid to ask for help. And then when you ask for help, right, and you don't get the answer that you want, it's like, well, see, this is why I shouldn't have done it. Don't give up. That's the thing. It's like, you got to feel, I hate saying this, but you have to feel comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you're entering a space that was not made for you. I entered a space that was not made for me. And I think the beauty of the journey that I'm going through right now, that my predecessors have gone through, and that other Latinas have gone through, and other attorneys and other professionals, and honestly, in anything, is that they were comfortable being uncomfortable in the spaces that they were in, and they were creating a space for others as well. So even though I'm in a space that I feel like I should not be in, the fuck I look like, I will create my own space, and so will you. But I do think that asking for help is extremely important, and doing things even when you're scared to do them is also very helpful. I was just talking to a really close friend yesterday. She's a Latina, she's from down south, and she was in higher education, and she just transitioned into finance, right? And she was kind of talking to me about the same experience of, hey, I was the only like brown girl in the room. Imagine this is LA, right? I was the only brown girl in the room. And there were things that were being said that I didn't really agree with. But at the same time, like, she's part of the community now that is paving a way for others to get involved in that community. And how important is financial literacy too, like in our community, right? We were talking about that, and just different areas to navigate, but we're going to have to do it without fear, because there are going to be a lot of obstacles and a lot of reminders along the way that those spaces are not for us. But it's a lot of reminding you, no, it might not be for you, but you're about to make something of your own, and you're going to create your own space. And if this is what you want to do, then this is what you want to do. And having resources, right, in terms of people who have done it, and, you know, kind of not pave the way, but also, yeah, pave the way. Like, and that's kind of the point right now. I feel like I'm always going to be in that journey too, right? 'Cause if I do want to be a judge, right, like I would love to, have Latina judges as mentors, right? Just, hey, what was your experience like? And what did you go through? And what difficulties are you facing now? And what do you think I should do? Right? I've never done this before. I don't have anybody in my family who's ever done this before. So just moving unapologetically without fear, even though you're scared, which you're going to be, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Be scared and do it anyway. Be scared and do it anyway. One of the things that I know for me is kind of like my orientation in life is kind of like this idea of a growth mindset, right? Every setback, every challenge is like, okay, what did I learn? How do I move better? How do I move differently? Am I scared? Yup. And what am I going to do? Like not do it? Like that's not the option that I'm looking for, right? And so it is like, how do we stay engaged with our own growth and recognize and validate that the fear is justifiable? You're doing things, we are doing things that have never been done before. And even if they've been done before, they have not been done at the intersection of everything that your life and your experiences have brought you to this moment, right? And so finding one of the things that I love about you is like how you talk about being able to find a different perspective that honors how difficult it is, but that says, fuck it, I'm gonna do it anyway. And I'm gonna keep pushing. Right. And I think sometimes, and it's not a right or a wrong way or a method, because some of us also have the gift, and I see it as a gift of being in the grief of like how hard this is, right? And so how do you do the both and? How do you grieve? How do you validate the feelings that you're having? How do you acknowledge that this is hard because it is? And also that your dreams, your aspirations, your hopes for yourself deserve the space to grow and to become. And then the other thing, and I think you and I have had this conversation a little bit before around this, like, orgullo, pride of just like, I don't want to ask for help, right? Like, I know that now that I'm like totally señora in my 40s, I've been a therapist for like 14 years now, longer than that, actually. I have like all these gifts, all this knowledge. I have time. It's like, take me out of coffee, ask me a question. Like, I want to dump my brain onto you, right? And I remember my younger self would have been terrified of going to someone like me and being like, can I take you coffee? Like, because I would have felt, what am I going to ask? What am I going to talk about? I don't want to waste their time. Am I smart enough? Like, am I in the right place? Right. And so some of it is fear. Sometimes it's also that being the eldest daughter in a family that has demanded that you do it on your own, and that, I know I take a lot of pride in being a DIYer, right? Like it's like, I don't know how to do something, I sure will find a way to figure it out. And that brings me a lot of pride. But that pride, along with the fear of I don't know enough, along with the fear I don't want to bother, along with the worry that I'm going to look dumb or that I'm not going to know how to use the person's time that I'm reaching out, those two things, the pride and believe in myself, and also the fear of like, am I good enough, has really gotten in the way of finding mentorship. And it is such a skill that we have to like be really conscientious about enacting when we're early in our careers. Because I know I didn't do that enough. One, I also didn't see a lot of Latina therapists. So it was just like, who do I even ask? Like, how do I find these people? We didn't have Instagram like we do now and stuff like that, or social media, right? So now it's more common. So if anything from this part is just like, notice how your own pride in being a DIYer and being a solution focused person and being like the person that your family relies on, how that in itself can be a barrier for you accessing what you need in order to be even more successful, or to just like remove some of the barriers I could have done without some of the barriers that I face. If I would, now I know that, but when I was going through, it's just like, no, you just gotta keep pushing, right? So it makes me think about that. What role does community and friendships play in your journey of creating this space for your voice? Because I know that like as friends now, we have some amazing conversations. And I find that my soul, every time that we hang out, every time that we talk, is just like, fuck yeah, like, You know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
And there's beauty on being able to find people that are at the same stage, even though we're different age.
Yeah.
And I'm a senior too.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
an elder. But there are some parts of our professional career and our professional journey that we are in very similar levels, right? And even though we do totally different things, there is this need of having friends and colleagues, but also people that you love that are like, yeah, like I'm going through that too. It looks a little bit different in my field. It looks a little bit different, right? So what role does community and friendship play in your journey around like finding your authentic voice, around having hard conversations? And how have these relationships helped you grow or even heal?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So I think, if you was to have asked me this when I was like early 20s, I feel like my answer would be so different than what it is right now. And I'm trying to be mindful of, like you said, I think that's an important point you made with people that are like just starting out. And honestly, it's like regardless of age too, because you can be starting out. Like I had some of my classmates were in their 50s, like in law school. Like you can literally start like anything at any time. And so I think there's a huge importance on community and friendship, especially like, and this is a completely different layer of this, but especially when you don't have the best relationship, like with your parents, which I don't have a relationship with my parents, but me and my siblings are, like thickest, like don't fuck with my siblings. You know what I'm saying? But, I've come to notice that one thing I've learned as I got older, and she's not that much of my senior. I'm 33 years old. Like,
it feels like it.
The whole saying is super cliche, but surrounding yourself around people that like you do admire, right? And you look up to, it really does make a difference, right? Not to say that you can't have friends that you kick it, you vibe, and you get along.
Yeah,
I think that there's people for everything, right? Like that you may need that you can provide, right, as well into the other person's life. I think, when I first met you, for example, like I was like, oh wow, like she's fucking killing it. And we don't do the same thing. Like I'm not sure she's a therapist, like, but at the same time, I've learned so much from you. Like it's crazy, right? And that's another thing I wanted to touch on is whether you want to be an attorney, a doctor, like whatever it is that you want to be, the person that you like latch onto or that you like, I feel like you can hitch your wagons to many different people and have them hitch their wagons onto you too. I think there's so much to learn from people and their journeys, because I feel like a lot of us, even though we have very different journeys, the perspectives that you get and how things are done, at least for me, makes me really like think about, okay, she's doing it like this or he's doing it like this. How does that look like? Like, and how did that work for them? And how am I thinking about my own stuff? And how can I be thinking about it differently from different lenses? And I think that is the beauty of community, is that there's nobody else like you.
Yeah.
You might have people that are similar to you, but there's nobody else like you. And I feel like if you're always in your own head all the time, it's like literally like the dog chasing their tail, right? Like if you're always in your own head and you're never getting feedback or input from somebody else that you trust, right? Because don't get me wrong, you're going to have people that try to lead you the wrong way too, whether intentionally or unintentionally, but
or that will have opinions about what you're doing.
That will have opinions, and people can have their opinions and you can take them for what they are. But I think it's important even to hear the negative stuff too sometimes. The people that doubt you and that hate on you, it's interesting listening to, because, hey, they have their opinions and they're going to say what they want to say. But at the end of the day, it does test you to really question yourself. What am I doing and why am I doing it? Like with anything, professional, personal life, love life, like whatever. So I think that being able to have a solid either family or community structure, regardless of how that takes shape for you, I think is extremely important. And that community doesn't need to be 20,000 people large. It can be 2, 3, 4, BFFs, friends, whatever, family members, whoever it is. But I do think it's important. But, I'm very much I'm huge on diversity and all, like, in whatever shapes that it can take. I'm huge in that, whether that's diversity of opinion, diversity of like culture, diversity of anything, anything, I think that's the best way to learn and like to help yourself grow. So I don't know if that answered that question, but
it does. It does. I love the imagery of like, what did you say? Hitching your wagon, and it's just like the links, right?
Yeah.
And that you can also unhitch and say, I'm gonna go this journey over here, but like the being in like a forward path. Having people like that in our lives is so necessary and it's so inspirational. And in those moments where you're feeling stuck, it really can make a difference, because sometimes we need somebody that is like pulling us because our wagon, you know, doesn't have it, right? Or has like a little, I have all these wagon analogies in my head. Now I'm going to use this in therapy. It's such a good visual, right? But like the forward momentum that everybody's having, and also kind of like with that mentality of like, we go up one, we pull one up with us, right? And so if you're needing mentors, you know, we're saying, please use us. Please use not only the two of us, but like everybody, the people that you see that are in this forward path, or that you feel a sense of admiration, a sense of like, how are they doing that, right? Like to be like an opening to ask and to be in community with folks.
And one thing I have like learned over the years about mentorship is it doesn't necessarily need to be in the traditional sense of like, oh, she's my mentor because, you know, she's older than me or he's older than me and he's doing exactly what I want to do. Like, I find a mentor in you. I find a mentor in a lot of my friends. I find a mentor in my siblings. And the reason why I say that is because I'm learning from you guys. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's always a learning like experience, like regardless of what it is that we're talking about, I always come out feeling like uplifted and refreshed. And even during hard conversations too, right? Like for me, I love giving too, right? I love being there. I love being an ear for you and for people and all that stuff, which is another reason why I'm an attorney. But you know, like I know, right? And so you were mentioning earlier about how like, I don't think you used the term awkward, but like awkward things can be, right? When you're like trying like, oh, I'm scared to reach out to this person. How do I ask them to coffee, right? I feel like when we put that notion of I'm about to ask them to be a mentor out of our head and go in it with, let me see what I can learn.
I like that.
And what I can contribute as well, and see if there's a vibe there.
Yeah.
I think that makes things, it paints things a little bit different. I think you get things a little bit different from the interaction. The friend that I was telling you guys about that I spoke to yesterday, to be completely honest, I felt really like strange, like being like, hey, like, can we reconnect? Because we haven't like connected in a while. But she's really involved in the community, you know, down south where she's from, and a lot of like Chicano, like the Chicano policy, like issues and stuff like that, very for the people. And, you know, I've been toying with the idea of like, oh, what would it look like to get into like policy, right, advocacy and stuff like that. And that's completely not my realm, like at all. But I know for her, like that is like, you know, that's her thing. You know what I'm saying? And so I was scared to be like, hey, like, can we connect? Right. And because it's like, again, how the fuck do I start these conversations? Right. Without being weird. But, you know, I went in with, I was like, you know what? Let's just like connect.
Yeah.
Tell her what I'm on and see what she's on and see how the conversation goes. And that's exactly what I did. And we were on that phone for like an hour and a half chatting about stuff. Right. And it just became an organic conversation.
Yeah.
Not every conversation is going to go the way you want it to go. Not every conversation is going to be organic. Not every conversation is going to be easy. And that's okay. You get through it and you keep it pushing.
And not every person that you admire is going to be the right person to
it's not.
show you the way or to give you what you're looking for, right? And so like, how do we not get discouraged to those moments? Because I think about the people in my life that are peer mentors that I mentor, that they're my mentors. We don't never have said, hey, you're my mentor.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
by the way, Michelle, you're one of my mentors. Just so you know. But it's like this like relationship building. Right? Recently, maybe like a month ago, somebody on Instagram reached out to me because a friend of a friend told them that I was a therapist and they aspired to be a therapist, and they took me out to dinner and they were like, hey, like, I just want to know. Right. But we ended up having like this 2-hour conversation about life, about things. And in there, inevitably, because, you know, she had an interest of becoming a therapist, I'm talking about like what I do and everything. But like, sometimes it's like the formality of just like, let me ask you some questions and let me just like, come to you or reach out to you with like a need versus like the building of a relationship. I think also like that frame is so helpful when you're looking at people to be in relationship with versus just like receive or be in a position to just give, right? Because in that also, I think about reciprocity, right?
Yes.
So I want to give 1,000%. I'm a generous person. I have so much knowledge that I want to give, but I'm looking to learn from every person that I'm with, right? And so if a part of that barrier of seeking mentorship or seeking a relationship with somebody that you consider way above like your level, right? It discounts the fact that we also have a lot to learn from like how you're experiencing the world and like the different experiences that you may be having that are different than ours. And that reciprocity, kind of like knowing your value, that you do bring something to the table, even if you're not at the same like professional level, right? Because what we bring to the table is like who we are, not necessarily what we know, where we went to school, what resources, like that's part of it. But there is also like the human connection of being in reciprocity and receiving as well as giving. Yeah. So with that, we've gotten to the end of almost our interview. And so adulting is fucking hard.
Yes.
We talk about this also all the time. You've overcome it. Here you are, a whole grown up. And sometimes it's like, you know, because basically my podcast is like this idea of being a señora, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, I feel like a responsibility to be a grown up. And sometimes it's like, I'm just still 17 eating like a Hot Pocket for dinner, you know? Like, it's like who put me in charge of my own life, but also like to give advice or to, you know, to be that adult to others, right? But like, looking back at your journey, what message do you want the listeners, whether they're exploring a similar path as yours or they're just like in a path of like becoming, that you want them to take away around this idea of like life is not always going to be easy, there are going to be challenges, but push through anyway, right? And so like, how do you like want to synthesize like the message that you want to leave people today based on this conversation? Yeah.
So I think the term adulting, of course it has its actual like technical meaning. I'm not a fucking adult. Like I'm adult by age, right? But I'm still a kid at heart. And I think that I wish somebody would have like really helped me see and appreciate that when I was going through like the mud of it, right? And trying to make it to law school or then, you know, make it to the bar, to try to give yourself some grace, right? And still embrace those parts of you that you may consider like childish or kiddish or, you know what I mean? But it can be refreshing, like just such a small like step and acknowledgement of, you know, this is where I started, this is where I'm at, and this is where I want to go. I feel like just even that reflection too is really helpful when you're going through a tough time or you're not going through a tough time, or if you're like, you know, you're having a really good day, you just accomplished something big. That's huge, right? Because it just reminds you like the work that you're putting in, the blood, sweat, and tears that you're putting in, that you're shedding, it's worth something. And as long as it's worth something to you, right? Because you might not have an audience all the time. The bulk of what you do, you're not going to have an audience for. And the moment you start feeling what you're doing, you need an audience or you wish you had an audience, I think some reflection would be helpful as to, okay, well, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Is it actually making me happy? And what do I do, right, to potentially explore something new? But I think giving yourself grace and compassion. One of my sorority sisters told me when I was in college, and it actually did really help because, you know, in college, as you said, you're trying to just get through it. But something she told me, she was one of like my old head, she was like one of the older sisters. She said, Michelle, you have to start learning how to have more compassion for yourself. I know that you're struggling. I know that you're going through it. But that doesn't cost you money to have compassion for yourself, right? It doesn't like cost you anything to have compassion for yourself and acknowledging yourself when you're doing a good job and acknowledging too where there's space for improvement, but having compassion for yourself. And the thing is, in my opinion, that follows you throughout your life, regardless of what stage you're in, regardless of the struggles, regardless of the highs, regardless of the lows, always having compassion for yourself. Because even when you're at your high point, you also want to make sure, like, in my opinion, humility is extremely important. You always want to remain humble and reminding yourself, hey, the compassion component of it for myself and others, I think there's a little bit of humility that's, you know, wrapped up into that as well. And always, if you can help somebody else, do it. Like, do the right thing. Like, do the right thing. Just because you may not have been treated the right way doesn't mean that you can't do the right thing still and try to break that cycle too, not just within yourself and your immediate family and friend circle, but also within the community as well. So I know those are a lot of like,
no, I'm taking
but
adulting doesn't have to be dull and boring.
Yeah.
Keep your inner child alive. If you need an audience, right? Or if like you're doing something for somebody else, it's like time for self-reflection. And kind of keeping that growth mindset with compassion, because I think like sometimes people are like, if I'm compassionate, then I'm going to be too forgiving of myself, or I'm just going to lower my standards, right? And compassion doesn't have to rid you of accountability, responsibility, and high expectations of yourself. But compassion towards yourself is just saying, I can learn from this. I can do it again. And when things are hard, this is why I get it, but let's keep pushing through. And so,
it's that one thing that I've been working on over the past few months, because, you know, I'm not medically like diagnosed with anxiety, but like I get really bad anxiety. Like, so my stress levels, a lot of where that stems from is just like the anxiety. I overthink. I'm like always thinking all the time, like, oh my God, like what if this happens? Like, oh my God, could I have done this different? So that overthinking. And one thing I've been really working on this past few months and what the meditation has helped with is one way I can show compassion to myself is acknowledging those feelings exist as an observer. Rather than
you are on the Calm app, like
so like as an observer,
I love it,
right? But it's helped me.
No,
right?
totally.
It's helped me like acknowledge, hey, I'm feeling X, Y, and Z. Okay, I'm feeling it.
Yeah,
let it go. Is there something that I can do to like change what I'm feeling or like address what I'm feeling? A lot of times there isn't. It's just like, oh my God, what if this? What if this? And it's like, bro, like, what if? You don't know. Like, you don't know, and you're stressing yourself out over shit that you can't either control or hasn't happened yet. So, I think compassion can take a lot of different ways of expression. But I think a lot of it, I guess, for me, is also like, you know, forgiveness too, like with different, you know, parts of your life and yourself too. But yeah. It's a lot. It can mean a lot. And that's a good like writing prompt too, right? Is what does compassion mean to you? And what does it not mean to you?
Yeah. How to rock the boat with compassion for yourself.
Yeah. Compassion and grace for yourself and others, to be honest. Yeah.
All right. We're going to have a part 2 because this is too good. Like, there's so many more topics that we can talk about. And so, you know, we get to have this, I get to have these conversations all the time with you. And here I'm sitting like, wow, you're dope. Like, thank you for being my friend. And so I really appreciate you. And we'll have a part 2. Maybe like the audience can give us some questions about other things to bring up. But thank you for today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you.
Until next time, next episode next week. And so subscribe, and I'll also put some links on the show notes about how to get in touch with you in case somebody wants to, you know, just touch bases, not only about being an attorney, but everything else.
About anything. Yeah. I'm here. I'm an open book. You can ask her. Like, I'm an open book. Don't hesitate to reach out. Yeah.
Till next time. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your tias and amiguis. Your support helps us reach more people and continue these important conversations. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself, embrace your journey, and keep living life with heart, vision, and creativity.